So hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio and my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined by the very talented Jason Dunn. Thank you for joining me, Jason.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you finding things at the moment?
Well, it's on the whole okay, actually. You know, it's up and down. I think we just adapt, don't we? And we try and make the best of it. Try and turn it into a positive. Yeah, we're okay. I mean, the fact that my boys are in school is a huge weight off my shoulders. The majority of my anxiety throughout this entire period has been that, you know, they're at home with their brains turned into mush on PS4s and Xboxes because I don't make a good teacher. maybe a telly teacher, but not the real deal, mate. Not the real deal.
Now, I mean, obviously, you know, since March, the whole country, the whole world has gone into this kind of weird situation. Obviously, theatre has, again, just recently in London has closed down again. For you, did it affect you work-wise when we sort of the early doors of the lockdown?
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a project called Innocent 2 for ITV, which was due to shoot in April. I actually had my bags packed. I've just remembered. I had my bag packed to go and do an episode of Casualty with a good mate of mine, Steve Hughes. And I was thinking, this isn't going to happen. I mean, there was all these rumours going around and you know, is the hotel going to be open? Are we going to be able to work? Is the restaurants going to be open? What's going on? And literally half an hour before I was due to leave for the station, I got this load of, you know, do not travel, which I was kind of pleased about because obviously we knew something was coming. And then in those early stages of lockdown, I mean, look, acting's a precarious business anyway. So what I didn't have is, you know, I don't go to the office. So, and now I couldn't go to the office. That's fine. I don't get paid on a Friday. That's fine. But then it started to get, you know, as it went on and on and on, because I thought this whole thing would last about 3 weeks. You know, oh, the kids are off school. Great. We can hang out together for 3 weeks. And then everything would return to normal. Little did we know. But as time has gone on, obviously production has been back up and running, which has actually worked in my favour. So if we talk about putting a positive spin on things, so the job that was supposed to happen, which was Innocent in Ireland, which was supposed to happen in April, we ended up shooting in September. Now we had to go and quarantine in a beautiful boutique hotel right on the coast. The weather was rather spectacular. It was absolutely stunning. And you could just go out for long walks. And so ordinarily you would arrive the next day or the day after, you would, you know, go to film, come home. You never get the chance to see it anywhere. There I was, strolling around Dunleary, having a fine old time and being paid to do it. So in that respect, thank you, COVID. Yeah.
Now, I mean, obviously, one thing that's super important is, you know, looking after your mental health. I mean, when you're obviously having to, you know, look after young kids and making sure that they're, you know, happy and healthy, did you find that tricky? I know you said obviously schooling was tough, but I mean, making sure that they're just happy and they're talking and being open.
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky because where we live is kind of semi-rural. So within minutes, you're in open countryside. And again, you know, putting that positive spin on things, it was spending quality time together. They were enjoying going out for walks. Yeah, so I know I've forgotten the question already. I'm spinning off.
So just about
about mental health. Mental health. Yeah. So going out for walks and all of that was fantastic. As I said before, the only anxiety is they love the competition of the classroom. They like being with their peers, you know. So trying to discipline them to sit at the kitchen table, it just drove me insane. As hard as I tried, I would just go outside muttering expletives under my breath. I mean, I had a respect for teaching before, but I've got an even greater respect now. Yeah, teachers and barbers. I mean, obviously the NHS, obviously, but you know, the immediate things that was you know, trying to cut my son's hair and taken an hour and a half to take half an inch off, because there's these horror stories and pictures of kids with great big bald patches. Yeah, so but there, you know, there was a lot to be grateful for. That I love the fact that time stood still. It was like Sundays used to be. You know, there wasn't much traffic on the road, and you could spend quality time together.
Did you find yourself learning any new skills over lockdown? I mean, I know people have been baking, gardening, learning a language. Hairdressing, there we go.
And also, so I managed to get some, because I do voiceovers in some radio dramas. So I got some kit and set up a sort of voiceover booth, if you like. So that was a steep learning curve as well, is how to engineer that equipment. You know, I'm not the greatest when it comes, I'm not the most technically gifted. I've sort of got the hang of it now. I mean, it is quite basic, but that was a bit of a learning curve, because I'm just used to turning up. Somebody else does all the technical stuff. So yeah, that I can make banana bread in my sleep along with the rest of the nation. Still not great on the clippers, to be honest. Yeah.
I mean, the other good thing, obviously, going forward is that you'll have these skills, you know, like, you know, you can do voiceovers from home, and that's something that you can take forward once we get out of this, you know, mad world we're in. Once we get to a new normal, you'll be able to use that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, even last week, you know, I'm doing this thing called Paddington at the moment, and so I just wandered into the room. I've put some acoustic foam in there and all of that, and wandered into the room. The job was done in an hour and a quarter. Now, under normal circumstances, I would be leaving the house at 9, going to the station, going down to London. I'd go into the studio, do the job, and it would take the majority of the day. And you can do the job just as well from my youngest son's bedroom, or from under the stairs, or wherever. I mean, of course, it takes that social element out of it. And, you know, I do love going to London. I lived there for a long time. I am a big fan. But equally, I would think I rather like just popping next door with a cup of tea and bish, bash, bosh, it's done in no time.
And then you're home for lunch.
And then you're home for lunch. The only problem is you haven't got anyone to make your lunch or go out for your lunch or bring you coffee. You know, so it's not all much better, you know.
Now, obviously, one of the projects that was, you know, a huge part of your life, and we must talk about it, is Waterloo Road. I mean, so many people, when I mentioned to people that I was doing this interview, everyone's like, Mr. Clarkson, we love Mr. Clarkson. So, I mean, what are your memories from working on that programme and playing Tom Clarkson?
It is unbelievable, because obviously when you do a job, you hope the job is going to be well received. You hope a lot of people are going to watch it, and then the job goes away. And this one is still going strong, sort of 14 years later. You know, I mean, it's mental. Even the other day, you Tom Clarkson? Yeah, but I haven't been Tom Clarkson for about 7 years. I mean, it's incredibly flattering. Like I say, of course, we didn't know at that point. And these are people, I think, these are new viewers. These aren't just people that are watching it and rewatching it. They're watching it for the first time.
I interviewed last year. I interviewed Jill Halfpenny, and at that point, they had just released all of the Waterloo Road onto the iPlayer. So obviously, you're going to get a new audience from watching it on the iPlayer now. Absolutely,
and also there's another COVID positive, because iPlayer didn't exist when we made it. We actually were financially rewarded for that this year as well. So given that it was all panic stations, you don't know where the next job's coming from, you're not eligible for any kind of grant or help or whatever. Waterloo Road actually came to the rescue financially as well. So you kind of go, wow, you know, thank you very much.
I mean, when that project first came up for you, when the role of Tom Clarkson first came along, did you ever imagine it would become the huge monster, but in a good way, that it went on to become?
No, And it sort of evolved even as a program. So what we were left with wasn't really what we started with, what we'd set out to do. I think if you watch certainly the first series, the first 6, it's actually a lot sort of darker, grittier. It's more from the teacher's perspective. And I think then what kind of happened was the BBC must have thought, hang on a minute, we're getting a younger audience, we're getting a younger demographic here. And of course, BBC are always desperate for a younger demographic. It's well known, it's their sort of, 40s, 50s, etc. And then, so they started to tweak it a little bit and tell the story from the pupils' perspective and balance it up that way. And then you found yourself, I think this is what happened anyways, is then you find yourself with a program that the whole family will sit down and watch, which is really rare. To get something that the whole family would be interested in and could relate to, either, from a nostalgic point of view or a current point of view. And so it was a little bit of TV gold in that respect, I suppose. They worked hard to achieve that, but they just kept, so it was very different. And there was absolutely no way at the time. You go from series to series in terms of, I hope we get recommissioned, I'd like to do some more. And you certainly had no idea that we would still be talking about it today.
And the other great thing about the show is it had a fantastic cast. Obviously, Jill Halfpenny, Denise Welsh, Jason Merrills, so many big names in that program. And the big names kept coming because obviously like Neil Morrissey later joined, and you had like Mark Benton, people like this who just, continually throughout the show, you would be having great actors. And then also the young talent who were being nurtured as well. Well,
and the young talent that's been nurtured that are now very much coming into their own, that are doing, these huge projects. I've just been working with Jack McMullen, who played Finn, who's fantastic, and he's on this Jimmy McGovern project called Time. So you will see people, there's Gemma Coleman, they're all going to come through now doing these big projects because they're fine actors,
And obviously during the time that the show was on air, it even moved locations and went up to Scotland. For you, was that a strange thing, having to, move from, Rochdale up to Scotland?
It was a bizarre move, and I don't know to this day why that happened. I thought it perhaps stretched the imagination somewhat. I don't know. I think that was a political decision. It was a BBC Scotland programme initially, but we obviously, as you know or may not know, we shot it in Rochdale, in the northwest of England. So it was a bit of a bizarre move, really, and pushing the boundaries of plausibility, in my opinion, my humble opinion. It still kind of worked. People were still loyal to the programme. But I also think people were a bit confused by it, to be honest.
And obviously, the show ran 10 series, and then obviously in the last series we saw the 2 kind of long-serving cast members were both killed off. For you, was that hard to say goodbye to that character, or was that always the plan?
I went in 8, so I only did 8. It was my decision to do it, and for several reasons. I thought I'd done as much as I could with it. I'd never stuck with a programme for that length of time before, although, thoroughly enjoyed it. But also it had moved to Scotland. My wife was pregnant with our second child. And the commute was getting to, you're just coming home on a weekend or whatever. Just was the final nail in the coffin, really, to make the decision. Acting for me, the excitement of it was always about going out, different places, different faces, moving around, taking on different challenges and opportunities, and it's stood me in good stead as Waterloo Road, and I'll be forever grateful to it. But I'd never stuck with a programme for that length of time before, so it was time to go. And thankfully, it was my decision. I'd have been really upset if they'd said, "Well, you're getting the boot, mate, the old Spanish archer, ta-ra."
If they'd have turned around and just kind of done the typical kind of black cab or, just send you off into the distance, do you think that would have had the same impact, or were you glad that you fell off a roof and died?
Well, I have to say, when I had the initial conversation with the producer, I said, look, I'd like to leave. His initial response was, we will leave the door open for you. And I thought, well, that's really flattering. So you're going to go out into the big bad world, but there might be an opportunity, if it doesn't work out, to come back. And then got the scripts, and it was like, right. But that was a far more fitting send-off to do something that was a bit more spectacular. And that was one of the most exciting days to work on the program, because we had this huge crane, harnesses being hoisted into, God knows how many feet into the air, and then dropped down on this huge height. It was really exciting. And I remember thinking at the time, if every day would have been like this, there's no way I would leave.
And I mean, obviously, Tom and Grantley, we must have, of course, mentioned Grantley Budget, who was such a great character. They were obviously, long stays on the show. And I mean, what would you say it was that, because those characters were hugely popular. I mean, what would you say it was that made them so popular? Do you think it was the longevity, or just that, people came to know and love them?
Well, it's the people that keep us there. I mean, if they have all these focus groups and etc. and things that go on behind closed doors that I don't know about, and I'm guessing that they can gauge whether people are engaged with those characters. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Sometimes you think, wow, they're being written out, or and yet other characters stay the duration. I think what Phil Martin Brown did with Grantley was incredibly entertaining and very funny. He's a really funny bloke. I don't know with Tom whether it was he became this sort of moral compass and friend to all. Who knows? I mean, it's for the people that watch it to answer, really, not me. I mean, again, really flattered by it, and that people were so moved, and that people really didn't want to see the character leave.
And I mean, since leaving the show, have you been able to keep in contact? I know you said you were working with one of your former co-stars, but have you been able to keep in contact with, people like Jill, Denise, those types?
I've seen both Jill and Denise at various sort of screenings or at the theatre. Phil, I talk to quite regularly. Jack, as I say, we just bumped into each other on time. Who else? I did a job with Rhys Douglas. We did Moving On, which is another Jimmy McGovern piece. So that's kind of what happens in the acting world anyway, is, if you're persistent enough in carrying on doing it, your paths hopefully will cross again. And it's really lovely to see everybody, because, genuinely, there wasn't a bad egg in the place, so we all got on. It was great fun.
Now, I mean, going forward, have you got a dream role or a dream person you'd love to work with? Have you got a project you would love to do in the future?
Do you know what I'd like to do? This is another COVID positive. I'd never seen Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
I must have been one of the few people on the planet, because I knew that, I thought, I know I'm going to love it, and it's going to take up so much of my life, because I'm going to have to watch it every night. Anyway, I'm so glad that I did. But it's just so epic and amazing that you go, I would love to do something on that scale. And I'd also love to do something that my boys could watch. They're only 10 and 7. They love watching like the nativity stuff around this time of year. I'd love to, it being Christmas and all, wouldn't you? It'd be fantastic to be, obviously not this year, but maybe next year, to be in a fantastic Christmas film, And
I mean, going back to Game of Thrones, also the great thing about it, obviously being an American show, but I'm pretty sure most of the cast are all British, so it was a way of kind of showing off British talent as well.
Absolutely. Well, I keep going back to time, but the last project that I did, with Sean Bean, and I got a bit starstruck actually. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously going forward, I mean, do you know what next year will hold for you? I mean, obviously everything's still a little bit uncertain, but have you got any plans for the new year?
No, I mean, I think it's great now that more productions are working again now. They're starting back up. They're putting COVID measures in place, obviously, but we now know that we can make it work, that things can be recorded and made in a safe environment. I mean, it's not ideal. It costs a lot more money to do that. People are having to be tested regularly. You've got kit. You've got, it's more time consuming. But it does mean that productions can be fully operational again. So we will see, mate. I mean, hey diddly dee, it's the actor's life. It's it's a blessing and a curse that you don't know what's around the corner, really, which is exciting and terrifying in equal measure.
And of course, Christmas is around the corner, and again, no one really knows what's Christmas is going to be like this year. But have you got plans for Christmas? Are you spending it with the family?
Yeah, we're just going to go over to my wife's mum and dad. I just heard some advice on the radio: don't pass the cranberry sauce. If you can avoid it, don't pass the cranberry sauce. Because obviously you don't want everyone handling all the sauces now. It's like it made me laugh out loud. I was like, we've come to this. You can't pass the cranberry sauce around the table at Christmas.
I mean, I want to know what crackers are going to be like. How are they going to work? Because obviously that's going to be a lot of bodily contact with those.
I haven't thought that through. They need to be sprayed down first, and then obviously you just pass them over one-handed. Don't touch both ends. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? It'll be different.
I heard someone said maybe open the windows, but it might be a bit cold for that if there's a cold breeze and everyone's sat there in their jumpers and everything around the Christmas table.
That's another bit of advice, which I think that's come from our German friends. Actually, is get some air in. I'd have no chance in my house. It's my missus is constantly freezing. I'm like, put a jumper on. I've turned into that old middle-aged man. So we'd have no chance of leaving a window open in here, mate.
Now, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. But before we go, have you got any messages for anyone who is stuck in hospital at the moment?
Well, let's just get well soon. And I hope you have as good a Christmas as you possibly can. And I think in general, what I've learned is just be kind to each other. And I think we're a lot more grateful for everything that we've not been allowed to have. Sending Christmas wishes to everyone that's in hospital. Obviously, it's not where they want to be, but just try and make the best of the situation, and just sending you lots and lots of love.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure. Of course, keep safe, and thank you again for giving up your time.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Take care, Matthew. Bye, mate.